once again. I'm Edmund DeVoe, president of the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. We are the state's cannabis chamber of commerce. Welcome to Lunch and Learn. What I'd like you to do is use the chat feature to introduce yourselves, ask questions, definitely network there. Make sure that you click on everyone and not just panelists. Make sure you click on everyone so that everyone can see your information. So as we do customarily, we'll acknowledge our sponsors. Sponsors for Lunch and Learn are Proteus 420, Financial Resources Federal Credit Union, Saks LLP, Burton Trent Public Affairs, Curaleaf, Garden State Green Energy, Dutchie, Puffin Entrepreneurs and Investors, and Sprague Energy, our preferred energy partner. Also, I'd like to bring to your attention an upcoming event where if you are considering a license, have a license, will be applying for a license in the process, you need to be at our April 12th event. It is going to be full of great information. We have excellent panelists that are coming from various aspects of the cannabis industry, the ancillary business space. So you definitely want to make sure that you are there for April 12th. And now, without any further ado, today's conversation, I'm joined by two outstanding professionals in the compliance space, each with their own expertise, each with their own experience in compliance. And so let's get things kicked off. With me is Warren Harasz from Cannaspire. So Warren, let's get started with you, and then we'll get with our next special guest, Ray Owens, a tax manager at Withum. Also a great, both companies are great corporate members of the Cannabis Business Association. So gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks so much for having us, Ed.
Thank you. So Warren, let's get started. So compliance. People are out there getting their licenses. They're getting into the space for the first time, didn't exist before. One of the things that can really create havoc for anyone in any industry is the issue of compliance. So if you would, take a moment, kind of define compliance and what is that overarching, or what are the overarching concerns, especially in the cannabis industry?
Absolutely. So really, I always tell all of my clients that compliance is about a record of compliance, right? So in terms of defining it, it's ultimately record keeping a really clean track record of every way that you're going to follow the state law and comply with the code, right? So sort of the way it starts with, any business is in that business license application, right? That's what I tell people is their first compliance document to the state. So whatever you're putting in your applications, you need to follow through with it when you actually go into operations.
Excellent. So that actually, if you would take a minute and talk about a little bit about what Cannaspire does, because you mentioned applications. I think it's important to realize or recognize what Cannaspire brings to the game.
Absolutely. So we are application writers, right? So at this point, we've written over 22 applications in New Jersey. We did an application in Alabama recently. We're working on a project in Florida. We are a national firm, and ultimately, I don't make up what the client brings to the application, right? They sort of bring their own background and their own strengths, and my job as an application writer is to make a really strong narrative of how this person is going to be a good steward of this license and why they're going to be able to maintain keeping up with the state law and the code.
Excellent. So when you're dealing with people, and again, this is all brand new for New Jersey, maybe there are those applicants that have done this in other states, but let's say you're a newbie to New Jersey. What are some of the things that you see in terms of application writing where people may struggle with getting information into their application?
So honestly, the biggest problem in New Jersey right now is real estate, which is not much of a compliance issue, right? Like it's actually the ability to find a space But in order to file your application, you need that site control and municipal approval in order to move forward, right? So this is one of those tricky things where sort of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and those applicants that spend their time getting to know their municipality and really digging in with their real estate agents, they tend to make it further. Now, in terms of what do you put into the application for these new business license applicants, it's basically a model of your business license, right? So if you're a dispensary owner, this is going to include even basic facility sanitation. If you're a cultivator, how you're going to maintain your recall strategies, plant tagging, and biomass tracking, down to how you even take out the trash. So a lot of these individuals haven't worked in the cannabis industry before, so there is a little bit of a skills gap. So ultimately, this is where it does help to hire, Cannaspire or other consulting firms that do have industry professionals that, have a background in operations that can help develop out these required SOPs for the application that are going to hit all of the points of state law, but also make sense in terms of what you actually do in the business day to day.
That's great information. So with that, Ray, at Withum and having a financial compliance expertise. So what are some of the common mistakes that you see from a financial standpoint, realizing that financial compliance, being able to produce the right documents, right time, what are some of the challenges that you've seen in working with applicants or even current operators at Withum?
Sure, and thanks again for having me. So a lot of my background is in tax compliance specifically. So that is really one of the first things we usually dig down on whenever we help review an application or look at projected financials. We're normally trying to see is that company properly understanding what Section 280E is intending to say and disallow, and or are they just completely oblivious to it? And believe it or not, we've seen some applications, especially in the early rounds, where there was no accounting for taxes at all on it. And it becomes very burdensome because you can get an effective tax rate of anywhere up to even hundreds of percents relative to your actual book income. So everybody needs a reserve. They need to be planning for taxes, and they need to be doing that as part of their overall strategy. So when you put in your application and you're trying to prove that you have a viable business plan, a lot of it comes down to numbers, because I think we all know at this point, the only one still fighting the war on drugs when it comes to cannabis is the IRS. I mean, a lot of the criminal laws have kind of gone away. A lot of the states are legalizing usage, but nobody can get over that hurdle in tax court. So, everybody wants to be aggressive. And a lot of the times our firm comes in and we say, okay, let's tell you what the letter of the law is, black and white, what can you deduct, which of course, I think a lot of people on this call know is cost of goods sold only. And then, where are some areas where there is some gray that you can potentially take advantage of? And then the very last part of that is, how are you going to have leftover cash to keep running your business after that huge tax rate hits? And how are you going to compensate, if you're a flow through, your investors so they can pay their taxes on their individual level? So that was probably a very wordy way of kind of giving just a high level view of some of the value we can provide in the application phase.
No, that's brilliant. In fact, that was actually going to be my next question, right? So we reach out to Warren. I've decided to jump into this industry. I realize I need help doing my application, but when do I call Withum? When do I call that financial expert? And then further, how long do I continue to keep you?
Well, we're trying to develop relationships for the long haul. We're useful in the beginning, I think, for financial modeling and helping you to decide, what can you do? When will you start to make money? How much money do you need up front to sustain the early years when most companies aren't positive in terms of cash flow? And then from year to year after that, we'd like to stay involved to help you file your taxes, do your projections, maintain that budget. And because as everybody knows, you have a yearly requirement to file your tax return. You have a quarterly requirement in most cases to cover your liability in terms of either estimated payments or withholding. So we're really trying to develop long-term relationships for the benefit of our cannabis clients. because we don't see 280E going away anytime soon. And every court case that comes out, we really haven't had a winner in a long time. The Champ case, the very first one, that's the only winner. Every other court case is pretty much just telling you one more thing you shouldn't do. So we can get in a little bit to maybe some hot topics and things that people are trying to do, but that's a high level view. We really want to be in it for the long term.
Now that's great information, Ray. I really appreciate that. So a question for the both of you, and I'll start with Warren and then Ray jump in. So we talk about capital, we talk about access to capital and how it's treated as being a real challenge in this space. So Warren, when somebody comes to you and says, well, yeah, I'm doing the application and maybe I'm looking at my immediate hurdles and I see access to capital as one of those hurdles. What is your take on that? What is your advice to someone who's in the application phase? And then Ray, I'd like to hear from your perspective when people talk about access to capital. What is it that Withum responds with? Warren?
Yeah, so I mean, everyone knows the industry's pretty bad right now, right? There's a shift happening from equity financing to debt, meaning that people are, much less willing to take a stake in a company for profit, but they might be willing to finance your debt because if your company goes under, hey, that has value, right? So that in and of itself is kind of like, it's tight to get capital right now. The vultures are circling a little bit. What I would say to try and get past that is a strong business plan, right? So financial pro forma, projections for 3 years, profit and loss, cash sheets. And then again, what sets your application apart? What is going to make this a winning license endeavor? And then what is your niche and trajectory into the industry? There are a lot of them, we've seen kind of a race to the bottom in terms of really big multi-state operators that just want to, make giant facilities that can produce product as cheaply as possible. And then there's always the premium end, organically grown flower that you're going to take a loss on your yield, but hey, it's going to sell on the market in its craft small batch, or, rosin presses and cold water hash, again, labor intensive model. But darn it, if all of my operator friends, even in California that are doing it small batch, they stay afloat in the licensed market. So it kind of gives you perspective that even in one of the most saturated states in the nation, if you're at a premium and you hit those marks of, craft, small batch, that can set you aside. So again, what is it about your license that's going to make you win? What is it about your business model that's going to set you apart from the competition? And then can you prove that with a really tight financial projection that then investors can scrutinize, and they know you're going to ask for money once and you're going to come to the table, you're going to make your ask, and you're going to get, completely up and into operation and fiscally successful in year one. If people don't feel that about you, good luck getting money. So it's really, talk to professionals who have been into the industry, and I'll turn it over to Ray because his firm does a lot of this same work. So
absolutely. Thanks. And honestly, I was about to say, I agree with everything you're saying. And then you hit that one last part at the end. I've never seen a cannabis company that's only asked for money once. It'd be really nice. Never seen it.
I would agree with that.
It is just a cash draining industry. At some point, you're going to need capital. So either it's going to be multiple capital raises or trying to find new debt financing. But I definitely agree with Warren. There's value in, I think, to being first to market, to really staking your claim first, and then being really good at what you do. And a lot of people are overextending, trying to become MSOs overnight, or maybe rushing to try and go public. And right now, it's just not really a great environment to do that. And so we have a lot of conversations with our clients about how we can raise capital and how we can plan to raise capital again in the future. And it's a little tough in New Jersey, right? Because there's that lockup period. So even trying to grant equity, you do it at the risk of diluting people who you're not really allowed to dilute for a couple of years. And there's that same provision in a couple of the other states that we work in too. I know Connecticut's got something very similar. So, we do talk to people a lot about debt, and right now it's very hard to get debt at a rate that makes any business sense. I know, the dollar signs are great. You see a $15 million debt facility, you really want to jump at it. But when you sit back and you do the math and you work with people like Warren on your projections in the very beginning, can you sustain those debt payments over the long haul, especially if New Jersey turns into, a similar situation in Massachusetts, where all of a sudden you're a couple of years in and now you're oversaturated and prices are going down. Can you still afford to be making 15% debt payments all the time? So I don't know if there's a one size fits all answer. I think that a lot of companies have to make situational decisions, and perhaps it's a mix. Maybe it's a mix of equity, maybe it's a mix of debt, but ultimately the most successful companies we work with, to Warren's point, I think they went lean. They were lean from the beginning. They focused on what they did well. Maybe you got an old warehouse and you just put equipment that would work in it. You didn't spend $100 million to build it out, because a lot of those clients that we have now are struggling a little bit. And I do believe they'll rebound, but the other clients seem a lot more comfortable right now through the hard times. So I think that going in with that mindset would be beneficial for a lot of new operators.
That's interesting, and I really appreciate that insight. In fact, it brings me to a question that I know when I've had attorneys on, I've asked attorneys to deal with this question, and now I would like it from your very specific viewpoints. And I'll start with Ray, and then Warren will come to you on this. So if I'm getting into the cannabis industry, and as you pointed out, Ray, I'm going to have multiple asks along the way. Look, even big Fortune 500 companies raise capital multiple times over their lives. So this is not unexpected. So with respect to who I am asking for money, is there some guidance? What do I look for when I'm looking for that person or people that say, well, yeah, I'll be an investor? What are some of the things that, from a financial standpoint, what are some of the buzzwords, or what are some of those triggers, if you will, that either make me say that this is a good fit for this person to be a shareholder, or, oh boy, I better run and run fast?
Well, I guess that's a very hard question to answer, because everybody goes into business with different goals. Although, albeit in this industry, I like the fact that everybody's kind of in the same mindset, but still a little bit differentiated. I think when you look to partner with people, I think business divorces are even harder than personal divorces, because there's just more money involved, if nothing else, right? And anytime there's money involved, people behave differently. So getting set with your lineup in a good place with like-minded people up front is important. Now, I think you want to look at a couple of different things when you take on investors. Are they looking to have an active role? Is it somebody who's going to show up every day? Is it somebody who's looking for a W-2 or perhaps a profits interest? Is it somebody who's just looking for upside? Are they willing to wait 5 years to potentially cash out on an investment? Basically how I sold to my wife that we were going to invest in cannabis companies. I told her, don't look for this money for 10 years. I'm going to put it in the stock exchange. We're going to go for it. Because what'll happen is there's just not the cash to give out a lot of times. And that creates a lot of shareholder conflict. They want dividends. They want those distribution payments to cover taxes on the individual level. And it's just not there. And, because cash is hard to find, you're really looking for people who are interested in sweat equity to start. Are you going to be the COO? Are you going to take on the CFO? Are you going to learn how to be the HR manager? Are you going to learn, go out to Colorado and get an education in how to grow, because maybe you can only afford a part-time grower right up front. So I think that's important. I don't know if Warren, you probably have a lot more early stage experience. You could probably expand on that a little bit.
So Ray, seriously, I was going to say almost exactly what you said. When you bring somebody to the table for a share in equity, what are they going to do? Okay, I see a lot of people that want to enter this game. All they bring is money, and currently lending is at 18 to 21% return for cannabis industry, and that's really, really high. Okay. So what is this person going to provide your company? I've seen a janitor that was basically sweeping the floors that had equity in a firm because he was, like a special individual to the owners of the company. And then, as you said, the divorce in the company happens and there's unhappiness. And you've got a guy that owns a percentage of equity in your facility that is miserable. And you're married to them. They're stuck in your facility, and it's such an uncomfortable situation. So from the operator's side, you need a great team. You really need to know that these people are in it for the long term and that they're investing in the, success of the company, not just their own personal dividends. And, they believe that in 5 years, this is going to be worth something, right? So anyone that wants a share of equity, money's great, but what are you going to do? Like, even if it's just funding, how is that going to be useful? How are you going to apply your skills and network to make us better?
So what would you say, and again, from both your perspectives, Warren and then Ray, with respect, what is the best way to raise capital? Is it hanging the shingle out saying, hey, look at me? Or is it some form of targeted type of discussion where I go to Cannaspire or I go to Withum and I say, who do you know? Did you vet people that may be potential lenders or potential investors? Warren?
So prepare first, right? You really need to know your business plan inside and out. You need to have done all of this research. So whether, Cannaspire writes your business plan or Withum writes your business plan, you need to spend time with us, the professionals, to make sure that you know every number, because these investors are going to grill you on it. Why is it X instead of Y? Why did you go this model instead of the other, right? And then from there, I've seen applicants that go for the conditional first so they can get a win under their belt and say, look, the state's already gotten us. Now we've got municipal approval. This license is going to win. We're right on the, 5-yard line. We just need the capital raise to get these last few ducks in a row, and we're going to make money. Then there are other individuals who they're so unique, their trajectory, their business model, their, personality as an individual. I've seen some really cool woman-owned and minority-owned businesses that were doing cooperative things or had really neat, community impact plans to sort of give back. And this makes them more palatable to the municipalities and then more palatable to investors that want that recognition. So there's kind of a lot of ways, right? Is there something special about you that investors are going to latch on to? Or is your business just such a sure bet? And oh, by the way, every number inside and out and can absolutely walk the investors through and assuage any fears that they might have. So.
Yeah, I agree. I do think we've strayed a little bit from compliance, but I do want to, emphasize the role that compliance plays when you go to raise money. Because a lot of the times you're dealing with people who are serial investors. They're angel investors, they're PE funds. These are going to be a lot of your first stops because obviously Wells Fargo is probably not going to give you money right now. And so what a lot of these guys are going to look at first in terms of taxes, in terms of your financial plan is, are you a risk? Are you a risk to go out of business? Or, as we talked about earlier, are you really a risk for IRS audit? And I think a lot of that goes back to how are you calculating your numbers? What kind of taxable income can you actually expect? And you see a lot of people who are, retail only, who have these giant cost of goods sold numbers and this methodology that might not be as defensible. And they're all asking for money. And I think a lot of the times they're striking out, even when we connect them with our best friends who are lenders, because people are just believe that it's an easy audit target. You got to go in with a solid plan and solid audit defense plan, because I think that's one of the first things you're going to be asked about when you go to raise money, because this industry is just ripe for audits. So it's kind of important to look at the big picture when you're trying to do something as important as bring in investors and get money.
That's great information. And you're right. So to to kind of take on what you've just said and bring it back to the realm of compliance, uh, there are terms out there. There's I guess infrastructure, software, hardware that's out there. Uh, from your perspective, what do you see or what do you hear about in terms of reliable systems that as I'm coming into this and I'm getting ready to go to Warren to write up my business plan, what are some of the either techniques or software or hardware? What are those items that I should be thinking about so that when I go to see Warren, I know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. And I'm sure, Warren, this is probably one of the first conversations you have with people is how are you actually tracking your data? And you can expand, I think, on the operational side of that in a second. But we're tracking financial data becomes very important in any business. And I think everybody's first thing that they think about is QuickBooks. But the fact of the matter is, cannabis, whether you're on the retail side or the growing side, is product-based. You're going to need that added-on software to help you track all of your products, all your SKUs, all of your plants from seed to sale, and then that financial information which feeds into your inventory. Then you go into your QuickBooks or your Sage, and you have your financial data, your balance sheets, your profit and loss, the stuff that allows you to make projections and stay viable. And I believe New Jersey mandates metric for cultivation sites. So I think a lot of people who have worked in the cannabis industry have had some run-in with metric at some point. It's fairly easy to use. It really helps you look at each plant and track it individually, and it's good from that standpoint. And obviously it allows the government, to come in and double check you. I think that on the other side, on the retail side, you have a lot more availability of different products to track your information. I personally am most familiar with LeafLogix, or what's now Dutchy, of course, one of the sponsors of today's call. Plug. But there are other ones. I mean, there's Trees, there's Kova, there's a bunch. MJ Freeway obviously was one of the early players who's still around. So you really need to decide which one's best for you, and then get a system in place and be able to take that information and bring it over into QuickBooks to put together your financial picture to look at your overall business health.
Right.
From sort of the high level perspective on compliance, it really starts with your org chart, right? So build out and identify that org chart. What are the roles and responsibilities? Develop out those SOPs. Some are necessary for your application. A lot aren't. There's a lot in your day-to-day operations that won't be covered by just your application that you're going to need to go through: cash handling, opening and closing, the nitty-gritty. And then from there, put it all in the cloud. I've seen Dropbox, I've seen Box, I've seen a number of cloud softwares. But then it really makes sense to either have somebody on your team that is dedicated to updating and staying on top of these regs and codes, or you hire a company like Cannaspire to update and stay on all of your compliance through some sort of subscription. Now, softwares, look, you have to get the state seed to sale, right? So if you're in New Jersey, you're doing metric. It does make sense to get a POS system that is going to integrate with that. So again, we've worked with Dutchy, great company. There are a bunch of other options out there, Kova, MJ Freeway, even BioTrack. And they all technically work more or less, right? So I try to stay agnostic on that as long as it's satisfying the compliance needs that the customer has, age verification, purchase limit tracking, biomass, transfer of custody, all of these things. So it's about really building compliance into the framework of your whole management structure and assigning who's going to be responsible for that, even if it's a contractor that you keep on staff.
So Warren, thank you, because you used a phrase there about in terms of some of the operations and what works, what doesn't work. So Ray, specific to you, and Warren, please feel free to add in here. So let's say I do have partners, I have investors, and things, we talked about the divorce, but what do I do as the license holder? What are my financial responsibilities? What are my compliance issues? if I want to start separating people from the enterprise that I've now created? Are there some, are there definitely some pitfalls to look out for when doing that? And what are my financial liabilities or abilities when I'm looking to do that?
Yeah, a lot of it's going to depend, and it's going to depend on your organizational structure in terms of your financial responsibilities. There's exits out of C corps where you're really just buying that person's stock. There might be some other ramifications if you had an LLC pass through. Um, Ultimately, there's a lot of different ways that might work. And again, going back to what I said earlier, are you even out of the lockup phase? Or is this even, some kind of agreement, some side deal you have ahead of time where you're going to dilute them down after the lockout phase? I think that you really need to be careful in New Jersey. I talked to one of the writers of the actual law because we had a question. One of our clients wanted to do something that's a very fundamental, business concept. They wanted to do more of a profits interest to compensate the sweat equity, but they had a 51% minority owner. And we read the rules in New Jersey, and we got really concerned that these rules are written in such a way where any time you cut out your 51% owner, if you do anything to marginalize them, you actually risk losing your license, I believe, because the rules are really written to protect that person. They don't want you to just have a name on paper and have somebody who's not in it for the real business purpose. So even though a profits interest or skewing allocations towards somebody who works harder might make business sense, you need to be careful of these types of things. So, this might be one reason why, W-2s in a corp might work a little bit better than an LLC. But either way, at the end of the day, this is a highly regulated industry. If you want to change ownership, and if you want to bring in, and we said earlier, even if you want to bring in new cash and they're coming in as equity partners, you really need to check with Warren or somebody who's really familiar with the regulations to see what hurdles you have to cross, who you need to notify in New Jersey so that you can make that change. I think a lot of us know that a couple of years back, Curaleaf did it without notifying Massachusetts. They got hit with a $250,000 fee. I don't think New Jersey is likely to do that to you, but I just don't think you need the extra headaches. And maybe Warren, you can elaborate on that because I don't know the actual rule with the CRC in this particular area.
So there are strict reporting requirements for ownership, right? And if you change ownership, then absolutely you have to show that whatever was in your business plan and in your operating agreement, that individual got, paid out and was given a fair exit, right? And they're going to scrutinize this. So I've seen these operating agreements really get combed over, especially in the LLC partnerships. And so this is where you have to just be really cautious, write it in a way that you think is going to best preserve the business in the future, if anything were to happen, and sort of try to think of, there are ramifications for replacing this individual, right? So like Ray just said, if you had a minority or woman-owned status, if that was what you got licensed on and you give that up, you might not get renewed for the next round. So you could be endangering your license and ability to operate at that point. So, really it's be careful is my best advice, and to bring in a lawyer and write a really careful operating agreement, because if in the event of a business divorce happens, you're going to have to be completely transparent with the CRC about who's leaving, what they're getting paid, and then who you're bringing in to keep your business afloat.
Yeah. And if I could even just really emphasize what you just said at the end, because I think that's a great point. There's a lot of people getting into cannabis and they're starting with their friend, the lawyer, or the lawyer who does some other specialty. And a lot of the times we're seeing foundational documents, these operating agreements, things like that are just, they're not well written, or they leave out very important details. Or my personal favorite, just given our current climate, you're an LLC who's elected to be taxed as a C corp. Have you made any changes to your operating agreement that would allow you to do that? Because you can't necessarily just take all of this language about all of this complex partnership tax problems and just all of a sudden now treat yourself like a C Corp and have stock and start issuing, non-qualified stock options. It gets very complicated. And so I think it's really important to spend that extra time on those documents.
Excellent point. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you. So before I ask you for your final comments, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today at Lunch and Learn. I once again want to thank our sponsors, Sprague, our preferred energy partner, Financial Resources Federal Credit Union, Curaleaf, Burton Trent Public Affairs, Proteus 420, Sachs LLP, Dutchy, Puffin Entrepreneurs and Investors, and Canna Remedies. Canna Remedies, thank you very much for joining us today. So gentlemen, any closing thoughts?
Compliance is all about staying ahead of the regulators, right? There are going to be areas that are less clear and areas that are crystal clear. So in order to do that, record keep, and train. I've seen a lot of compliance issues arise from people that train their employees once, assume that everyone knows their job, 6 months go by and the regs change, and the next thing you know, or bad habits set in and, people start doing things that are out of compliance, they start getting fined. So stay on top of the regs, stay on top of what you're writing, and train.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. I think that the most important thing when we talk about compliance is record keeping. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, my background is in tax. I think that a lot of people will eventually get audited. I think that you should stay on top of your books and records, stay on top of your tax from the word go. I think there's a lot of people out there selling magic bullets in the cannabis industry. Be very wary about who you talk to and what advice you buy. You never want to get into a situation where the IRS is your creditor or the federal government is. Stay on top of your bills to the best of your ability, and prepare as if an audit is coming. Do that with the IRS. Do that in terms of your investors. They might want to look at your books as well. So that would be my best advice.
Excellent point. I want to thank Warren Harasz of Regulatory Compliance at Cannaspire and Ray Owens of Tax Management within Withum. But guys, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Everyone that's here, don't forget, on April 12th, we have a big seminar taking place. Great panel discussions. So April 12th, check out our website, visit our website to register for the event. Would love to see you there. Again, it'll be a lot of great information like we had today. April 12th, getting your license. Now what? Join us. Intense sessions from 3 until about 7, and then networking afterwards. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. Have a great weekend. Again, Warren Harasz, Cannaspire, Ray Owens, Withum. Thank you both very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
Great. Everyone, take care. Have a great weekend.